Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going deep, really deep, into a story that's, well, it's full of drama, resilience, and ultimately triumph.
Sounds intense.
It is. We're talking about the Bahá'í Faith and its incredible journey during its first century.
Oh, wow. The Baha'i Faith. That's a pretty big topic.
Yeah, it is. And to help us unpack it all, we're turning to God Passes By, a book that chronicles this really remarkable period.
I'm intrigued already.
So think about this. It's 19th century Persia, a time of, immense change and upheaval.
Right. A lot of traditional ways of life being challenged.
Exactly. And in this setting, a new religious movement bursts onto the scene, one that, well, it completely shakes the foundations of society.
I can see how that would cause some serious ripples.
Oh, it did. And those ripples, they're still felt around the world today. That's what we're going to explore, how this faith went from being intensely persecuted to having a global presence.
It's a pretty wild trajectory.
It is. It's a story of incredible resilience, where persecution and triumphs were almost intertwined, almost cyclical.
Like a phoenix rising from the ashes.
Yeah.
Again and again.
Exactly. Now, our deep dive starts with the Báb.
The Báb.
Yeah, he was the herald of the Bahá'í Faith.
Okay, the herald.
It's like, imagine, just close your eyes and picture yourself living in 19th century Persia. It's a world steeped in tradition, very conservative, and suddenly this figure emerges.
This is the Báb.
Yeah, the Báb. And he's teaching things that challenge everything, the very fabric of society.
You've got to give us some examples. What kind of teachings are we talking about?
Oh, he talked about the equality of men and women, the elimination of religious prejudice.
Whoa, that's radical for that time period.
I know, right? And he advocated for a world united under one God.
And I'm guessing this didn't go over well with everyone.
You got it. The book describes it as deranging the equilibrium of the world. It's like, you drop a stone in a still pond and the waves just ripple outwards.
Makes sense. That kind of disruption, it tends to make people uncomfortable.
A big time. And the Báb and his followers, they faced immediate opposition. I mean, intense pushback.
So what happened? What did this opposition look like?
Well, think imprisonments, threats, you name it.
Whoa, so right off the bat, things were pretty intense.
They were. But here's the thing, even behind bars, the Báb's influence, it just kept growing.
Really? How is that even possible?
Well, there's this one story about Manuchir Khan.
Okay, who was he?
He was the governor of Isfahan, a pretty powerful guy.
So not just anyone.
Not at all. And he was so moved by the Báb's teachings that he was ready to, dedicate his entire fortune to the faith.
That's some serious dedication.
Yeah, right. He even planned to try and convert the Shah himself.
Whoa! Talk about a bold move. That could have changed everything.
I know, right? It just shows you the kind of impact the Báb had on people, even those in, positions of power.
It's amazing how a message can resonate so deeply, even in the face of such adversity.
Totally. But sadly, not everyone was so receptive. The Báb's teachings, they also sparked, a wave of persecution against his followers.
Oh, man. So it wasn't just the Báb himself facing hardship.
Unfortunately, no. And these early believers, they demonstrated incredible courage.
Give us an example. What kind of courage are we talking about?
Take the 7 martyrs of Iran.
7 martyrs.
Yeah. They were offered freedom and wealth, all the good stuff, if they simply renounced their faith.
That's a tough choice to make.
It is. But they chose to stay true to their beliefs, sacrificing their lives in the process.
Wow. Their story really highlights the depth of their conviction.
For sure. But even amidst all of this, this persecution, the Báb kept writing.
He did. What did he write about?
Well, he produced this major work called the Qayyum-ul-Azma.
The what?
The Qayyum-ul-Azma. It's a really important text in the Baha'i Faith. And, it's full of prophecies, some even hinting at the coming of another, even more significant figure.
Wait, so even while he was facing persecution, the Báb was talking about someone else coming after him?
Yep. Baha'u'lláh.
Oh, okay. So that's where Baha'u'lláh enters the picture.
Exactly. The Báb was really explicit about this, saying that his own ministry was just a prelude, preparing the way for a greater revelation to come. Imagine the anticipation, the excitement among his followers.
Yeah, I can only imagine it's like, setting the stage for the next act in this incredible drama.
It is. But before we get to Baha'u'llah's emergence, we have to talk about what happened to the Báb.
Oh, right. What happened to him?
Well, they tried to execute him, and it was dramatic, to say the least.
Tried to execute him? What do you mean tried?
Okay, so picture this. The Báb is suspended before a firing squad.
Oh, wow. This is intense.
Right. They fire their guns, smoke fills the air, and when it clears, the Báb is gone.
Gone? What do you mean gone? Like vanished into thin air?
Vanished. All that was left was his companion, unharmed, ropes severed. Later, they found the Báb back in his cell, just, calmly writing.
That's insane. I mean, what? Did anyone have an explanation?
It was seen as a miracle by his followers. It defied logic, fueled the belief that the Báb was divinely protected.
I can see why. I mean, that's a pretty strong sign.
Right. But sadly, this reprieve, it was temporary.
Oh, no. So he was eventually executed.
Yes. Leaving his followers devastated, but also determined to carry on his mission.
I bet. It's incredible how such adversity can strengthen a community's resolve.
And there's one more figure we have to talk about before we move on to Baha'u'lláh.
Ṭáhirih. Tell me about her.
She was this remarkable woman who became really prominent in the Bahá'í Faith. I mean, she was outspoken, challenging traditional norms, advocating for women's rights.
Wow, that's incredibly bold, especially in that time and place.
Oh, absolutely. She faced persecution, too, ultimately being executed for her beliefs.
It's so sad to think about the sacrifices these early believers made.
I know, right? But their stories are also incredibly inspiring.
Absolutely. They really paved the way for the Bahá'í Faith to grow and flourish.
They did. But there's also this other kind of intriguing aspect to this whole story.
Oh, what is that?
Many of the Báb's persecutors, like the Shah himself, met really untimely and kind of tragic ends themselves.
Really? Almost like fate or maybe even divine justice was at play.
It's a thought, right? It definitely would have strengthened the faith of the Báb's followers.
Sure. But with the Báb's martyrdom, what happened next? I mean, how did his followers cope with such a huge loss?
That's where things get even more interesting. Remember those prophecies about a greater revelation to come?
Oh, yeah. Right. So this is where Baha'u'lláh comes in.
You got it. And his emergence, well, it marks a whole new chapter in this incredible saga.
Okay, I'm hooked. Bring on Baha'u'lláh.
But before we do, let's just take a moment to really appreciate those early Bábís, their courage, their sacrifice, their unwavering faith in the face of, well, just incredible adversity. It's truly remarkable, and it laid the groundwork for the global faith the Bahá'í Faith is today.
Yeah, you're right. Their story is a testament to the power of belief and the enduring human spirit.
So, ready to explore what happened next? To see how the Báb's prophecies unfolded and how the Bahá'í Faith started to, spread its wings.
Absolutely. Let's dive in.
All right, so we've talked about the Báb, his, dramatic ministry and the persecution his followers faced. Now let's turn to Baha'u'lláh.
Okay, Baha'u'lláh.
He's the prophet founder of the Bahá'í Faith.
Right, the one the Báb was kind of foreshadowing.
Exactly. And he was a follower of the Báb, so you can imagine it was a pretty intense time for him, too.
Yeah, I bet. To be part of a new religious movement already facing so much opposition.
Totally. And his life, it's fascinating how it unfolded.
Tell me more. What was so fascinating about it?
Well, even before he publicly declared himself as a prophet of the Bahá'í Faith, he was having all these profound spiritual experiences.
Spiritual experiences, like what?
The book calls them stirrings of God's revelation, like these moments where he felt a powerful spiritual force flowing through him.
Whoa, that's intense. And this was all before he even officially started the Bahá'í Faith.
Yeah, it's like he was being prepared for something big.
I can see that.
Right.
And then there was his imprisonment in Iran, right?
Right. Which, that was a pretty harrowing experience.
It must have been. How did that impact him?
It seems like it really pushed him further along on his, spiritual journey.
I could see how that kind of hardship, it can lead to introspection,
Yeah.
Like a search for meaning.
Totally. And in prison, he describes these incredible moments of revelation.
More revelation, so on top of the ones he was already having.
Yeah. Like finding strength and clarity in the midst of all that darkness.
Almost like pressure creating a diamond,
It's a good analogy. And after his release from prison, Baha'u'lláh was exiled to Baghdad.
Exiled again. Man, that's rough.
It was. But here's the thing. Baha'u'llah's mission, it didn't just suddenly appear fully formed.
Oh, so it wasn't like a lightning bolt moment?
Well, it was this gradual unfolding, a slow and challenging process.
So even as he was going through all these hardships, his mission was still developing.
Exactly. It's a really important point to understand.
That makes sense. And during this time, he also had to deal with his half-brother, Mirza Yahya, right?
Right. And that adds a whole other layer of complexity to the story.
What was going on with him?
Well, Mirza Yahya was initially seen by some as the Báb's successor.
Oh, okay. So, a potential rival?
Yeah, you could say that. And this sets the stage for a power struggle, one that would have huge consequences for the Baha'i community.
A power struggle. So not just external pressure from, like, society at large,
Yeah.
but also conflict within the movement itself.
Yeah, it was a challenging time for sure. But even with all that going on, Baha'u'llah's influence just kept growing.
Seriously.
Yeah.
In the middle of all this drama.
Yeah, it's like the more opposition he faced, the stronger he became.
Wow. So who was he attracting? What kind of people were drawn to him?
People from all walks of life, scholars, government officials, you name it. And his teachings, they had this transformative effect on people.
Transformative. Give me an example. Like, how did people's lives actually change?
Well, there's this story about Sayyid Ismail, a really devoted follower. He was so moved by Baha'u'lláh that he would sweep the streets outside Baha'u'llah's house, out of love and reverence.
Oh, that's kind of sweet. I mean, just a simple act of service, but it shows how deeply he cared.
Exactly. It speaks volumes about the kind of impact Baha'u'lláh had on those around him.
So inspiring. But you mentioned tension with his half-brother. Did things ever, like, calm down between them?
Unfortunately, no. The conflict with Mirza Yahya kept escalating.
Oh, no. So what happened?
Well, it got so bad that Baha'u'lláh had to withdraw to the mountains of Kurdistan for a while.
To the mountains? Why?
It was a strategic retreat, to get away from the drama and find some peace and quiet.
Okay, so a time for solitude and reflection? Did it work?
It did. He attracted new admirers during this time, resolved some theological disputes among his followers, and even wrote some of his most influential works, like Adversity Fueled His Growth,
Makes sense. Sometimes you need to step back to move forward.
But I'm guessing this peace and quiet didn't last forever.
Sadly, no. Mirza Yahya, driven by jealousy and ambition, resorted to some pretty drastic measures.
Drastic measures? What do you mean?
He actually tried to have Baha'u'lláh assassinated.
What? That's insane. How did that even happen?
It's a long story, full of intrigue and betrayal, but thankfully the attempt failed.
Oh, thank goodness. But I can't imagine what that must have been like for Baha'u'lláh to be targeted by his own half-brother.
It was a devastating experience, no doubt.
Yeah.
But it's remarkable how he came out of it even stronger, more determined to spread his message.
It speaks volumes about the strength of his convictions.
Doesn't it? He refused to be silenced by violence and fear.
So, what happened next? How did he keep spreading his teachings after all of this?
Well, this is where we come to one of the most pivotal moments in Baha'i history. From Adrianople, Baha'u'lláh did something incredibly bold.
Okay, what did he do?
He wrote letters directly to the kings and emperors of the world.
To the kings and emperors. Why?
He was proclaiming his mission, calling for justice, unity, and peace.
Wow, that is bold. A prisoner exiled from his homeland, writing to the most powerful rulers of his time.
It was an act of defiance, but also an act of unwavering faith.
Imagine the courage it took to stand up to those in power like that.
It's incredible. And what's even more amazing is that he actually warned these rulers about the consequences of not listening to him.
Like, he predicted their downfall if they rejected his message.
Exactly.
And did his predictions come true?
Well, let's just say that Napoleon III, who completely dismissed Baha'u'lláh, ended up losing his empire in a pretty humiliating defeat. And Saloon Abdulaziz, who was responsible for Baha'u'llah's imprisonment, was eventually deposed and assassinated.
No way. That's crazy.
It makes you think, doesn't it?
Definitely gives you pause. So, while all of this was going on, what was happening with the Baha'i community itself?
Well, they were going through a profound transformation. The Báb's prophecy about a greater revelation, it was coming true. Baha'u'llah's teachings, they were starting to eclipse the established religious hierarchies, not just in Persia, but in other parts of the world too.
So his message was spreading beyond Persia's borders, becoming a global phenomenon.
Exactly. But before we get into the global expansion of the Bahá'í Faith, we need to talk about Abdu'l-Bahá.
Abdu'l-Bahá. Okay, who was he?
He was Baha'u'llah's son and his appointed successor.
So, like, the next leader of the Bahá'í Faith.
More than that, actually. Baha'u'llah designated him as the center of the covenant.
Center of the covenant? What does that even mean?
It means he was entrusted with interpreting his father's teachings and guiding the Baha'i community.
So, like a spiritual interpreter and leader all rolled into one?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
He was the bridge between Baha'u'llah's revelation and its practical application in the world.
That's a huge responsibility. I bet he faced a lot of challenges.
He did. One of the biggest was dealing with opposition from within the Baha'i community itself.
Opposition from within? What do you mean?
There were some people, called covenant breakers, who opposed Abdu'l-Bahá's leadership and tried to create division.
Oh, wow. So even with a new prophet and a growing movement, there was still internal conflict.
Sadly, yes. But Abdu'l-Bahá, he navigated it all with incredible grace and wisdom.
So how did he manage to lead the Bahá'í Faith through all of this? What were some of his accomplishments?
Well, for starters, he oversaw the completion of the shrine of the Báb on Mount Carmel.
The Shrine of the Bahá'í.
Yeah, it's a really sacred site for Baha'is.
I can imagine. And this was a challenging project, right?
Oh, absolutely. It was full of obstacles and setbacks. But ultimately, it was a symbol of the Bahá'í Faith's resilience, its triumph over adversity.
A powerful symbol. What else did Abdu'l-Bahá do during his leadership?
Well, he also initiated the groundbreaking for the first Mashriq al-Adkar in Chicago.
Mashriq al-Akar, what is that?
It's a Baha'i house of worship.
Like a temple or a church?
Kind of, but it's open to people of all faiths. It's a place for prayer and meditation, a symbol of unity.
Wow, so a shrine in the Holy Land and a house of worship in the West, all happening around the same time.
Exactly. It really shows the global reach of the Baha'i Faith at this point.
And Abdu'l-Bahá, he actually traveled to the West himself, right?
He did. He shared Baha'u'llah's message of unity and peace, planting the seeds for what would become vibrant Baha'i communities in Europe and North America.
It's amazing how one person can have such a huge impact.
It really is. But as with all of us, Abdu'l-Bahā's time on Earth was finite.
Right. So what happened to the Baha'i Faith after he passed away?
That's a great question, and it leads us into the final phase of this incredible first century. Abdu'l-Bahá, with remarkable foresight, had already laid the foundation for a system of governance designed to safeguard the faith's unity and guide its future development.
A system of governance. Tell me more about that.
It's called the Baha'i Administrative Order, and it's truly unique.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive into that. But first, can we just take a moment to appreciate Abdu'l-Bahā's role in all of this? I mean, he kept the Bahá'í Faith unified during a really challenging period, and he set the stage for its continued growth on a global scale.
Absolutely. His leadership was remarkable. So, ready to explore this Baha'i Administrative Order, to see how it shaped the next chapter of this story.
I'm all ears. So we've journeyed with the Bahá'í Faith from its turbulent beginnings in Persia through exile and persecution to its expansion onto the world stage. And now we're going to look at how the Baha'i community navigated the transition after Abdu'l-Bahā's passing.
This is where things get really interesting, right? How do you create a system of governance for a rapidly growing, incredibly diverse global community?
That's the million-dollar question. And the Baha'is, they came up with a pretty unique answer. Something called the Baha'i Administrative Order.
Okay, the Baha'i Administrative Order. What's so special about it?
Well, for starters, it operates without clergy.
No clergy, what do you mean?
It means there's no priesthood, no intermediary between individuals and their understanding of the Baha'i teachings.
Oh, wow. So it's a very decentralized system.
You got it. It's all about empowering individuals and communities.
I like that. But how does it actually work? I mean, who's making the decisions?
So at the local level, you have local spiritual assemblies.
Local spiritual assemblies.
They're elected annually by adult members of the Baha'i community. Each locality has its own assembly, and they're responsible for the spiritual and social well-being of their community.
So, like, promoting the Baha'i teachings, organizing activities, that kind of thing.
Exactly. It's very grassroots, giving power to local communities to manage their own affairs.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
But what about coordination on a larger scale? I mean, how do you keep everyone on the same page?
That's where national spiritual assemblies come in.
National assemblies.
Yeah. Delegates elected from the local assemblies, they form these national assemblies, which coordinate activities on, well, a national level, and deal with matters that affect the entire Baha'i community in a particular country.
It's like a beautiful tapestry, weaving together local communities into a larger, unified whole.
I love that analogy. And then the ultimate governing body, envisioned by Baha'u'lláh, is the Universal House of Justice.
The Universal House of Justice.
Yeah, an international elected body that will guide the entire Baha'i world.
Wow, a global elected body. Has that been established yet?
Not yet, but it's something that the Baha'i community is working towards. Can you imagine? A global body operating without any political or religious affiliations, solely focused on the betterment of humanity.
It sounds almost utopian.
It does, doesn't it? But that's the vision. And what's really interesting is that this Baha'i administrative order, it incorporates elements of both democracy and spiritual guidance.
So you have elections, consultation, the consent of the governed, but also this spiritual dimension, drawing on the teachings of Baha'u'lláh.
Exactly. It's not a theocracy, but it's not a purely secular democracy either. It's something unique, a blend of the material and the spiritual.
I'm seeing a pattern here. I mean, the Bahá'í Faith, from its very beginnings, has always been about pushing boundaries, challenging traditional ways of thinking.
It has, and this Bahá'í administrative order, well, it's another example of that, but establishing this new system of governance, it wasn't easy.
I bet. I mean, there were those covenant breakers, right?
Yeah.
The ones who opposed Abdu'l-Bahá's leadership.
Yeah, and they didn't just disappear after Abdu'l-Bahá passed away. They actively tried to undermine the Bahá'í administrative order to create divisions within the community.
So even with a new system in place, there were still forces working against unity.
There were, but Abdu'l-Bahá, in his wisdom, had anticipated this. He'd clearly outlined the line of succession, the authority of the administrative order in his will. And that, combined with the steadfastness of the majority of Baha'is who remained committed to unity, helped to overcome those challenges.
Wow, so even in death, Abdu'l-Bahá was guiding the Bahá'í community.
In a way, yes. And this newfound unity, it allowed the Baha'i community to channel their energy into some pretty incredible projects.
Like what? Give us some examples.
Well, there was the construction of the Mashriq al-Adkar in Ishkabad.
The Mashriq al-Adkar in Ishkabad.
This magnificent house of worship, known for its intricate designs and stunning architecture. It was a true marvel of its time, a testament to the Baha'is' commitment to beauty and unity.
It's tragic that it was later destroyed. Such a loss, not just for the Baha'is, but for the world.
It was. But the spirit behind its construction lives on. The Baha'is continued to build houses of worship around the world, each one unique, but all united in purpose. To be beacons of unity, places where people of all faiths can gather and connect with the divine.
It's a beautiful expression of their belief in unity and diversity.
It is. And we can't forget about the incredible work of individuals like Martha Root.
Martha Root, tell me more about her.
She was a dedicated Baha'i teacher who traveled extensively, spreading the teachings of the Baha'i faith to all corners of the globe. She even met with Queen Marie of Romania, who became a vocal supporter of the faith.
It's amazing how one person can make such a difference. So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the Baha'i Faith's first century, what stands out to you the most?
Honestly, it's the resilience of the early Baha'is. They endured so much persecution, loss, and hardship, yet their faith never wavered. They kept pushing forward, building their community, creating this incredible system of governance, and sharing their message of unity with the world.
It's a powerful testament to the strength of the human spirit.
It is. And what I find particularly fascinating is how they established this unique system of governance, this Baha'i administrative order. It's like they were creating a blueprint for a new model of social organization, one that values both individual agency and collective progress.
It's a model that's still evolving, but the core principles are their unity, justice, consultation, and a commitment to building a better world.
And those principles, I think, are what resonates so deeply with people today. In a world facing so many challenges, the Baha'i Faith's message of unity and its model of collaborative governance offer a real glimmer of hope.
I agree. It's a message that transcends borders and beliefs, a message that speaks to our deepest longing for peace, justice, and a world where everyone can thrive.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today. From the Báb's dramatic declaration to the establishment of the Baha'i administrative order, it's been a whirlwind journey through a century of history, a century filled with remarkable individuals, immense challenges, and inspiring triumphs.
Say it has, and the story doesn't end here. The Baha'i Faith continues to grow and evolve, spreading its message of unity and peace around the world.
Which makes me wonder, what role might the Baha'i Faith play in addressing the challenges facing our world today? It's something to think about.
It is, because history, it's not just about the past. It's about understanding the forces that shape our present and influence our future.
Well said. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the fascinating history of the Baha'i Faith. We hope you learned something new, gained a new perspective, and maybe even feel inspired to explore further.
Until next time.
Take care.